All right. Welcome to Americans Learn. My name is Kit. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe and hit that ring bell notification. That way, all you lovely, beautiful people are made aware when we upload new content upon our, you guessed it, YouTube channel. And today, we're about to check out a fun video from Kraut called What Even Is Europe? What is Europa? What is Europe? It used to belong to Rome. I'm sorry. Sorry. Unbiased history is still in my heart. How dare they all stand where he once stood? Never mind. Anyways, this is from Kraut. So, folks, listen. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit that ring bell notification like you should. So that way you're made aware we upload new content upon this YouTube channel. But also, please, folks, listen, you hip, cool cats, you lovely, beautiful people. We here at Americans Learn encourage all you beautiful people to please support the original content creator. It's what a true Roman would do. It's what a person who would ask even what is Europe would do. So if you don't got to get it, and if you don't get it, I'd better go figure it out. So let's go ahead and enjoy this video. In a 3, a 2, and an uno. Let's go and play this video. So let's go check it out. What is Europa?
This video is about the European Union, specifically examining it within the context of European history and how we should interpret and understand it.
Oh, you got the Holy Roman Empire. You know what you don't have? Rome. But hey, whatever.
In that context, what the purpose of the European Union may be, and what the European Union means for the future of Europe. This video is also sponsored by Enlisted. Enlisted is a first-person shooter set during the Second World War. You can play the game for free on PC, Xbox and PlayStation. It includes campaigns set in the Pacific, the Eastern Front, the Battle of Normandy and North Africa.
Speaking of Pacific, have you done that second follow-up video for Japan? It's been a couple of years. It would be ever so nice.
I personally prefer playing the Pacific campaign the most, since that scenario is often ignored by other games. If you played first-person shooters before, you should feel right at home. You join the game for free and pick a squad specialization, from infantryman to sniper, machine gunner, tanker or flamethrower. As you progress with your squad through the game, you will earn XP points to upgrade your squad and gear. There are also various different game modes to choose from invasion, that positions one team on the defense while the other has to take the ground, to armored train escort, where one side has to protect an armored train from another. You can download and play the game for free by using the link in the description. If you use that link, you will also gain access to 3 days of premium time and several orders for troops and weapons. Thank you to Enlisted for sponsoring this video. Conversations about the historical context of political development in which we ought to understand the European Union are some of the most divisive of our time. We Europeans love to tear each other apart over this issue. What even is the European Union? How should we understand?
Yes. Good. You got Rome there. Already 10 out of 10 epic life-changing video.
The development of the European Union in the context of historical political developments. I'm going to make this video opening that can of worms to enjoy the circus and chaos that will evidently result in the comment sections.
By the way, hey, let's have the comment section be nice, but to our European friends, guys and gals, those in Hispania, Gaul, Germania, Britannia. How do you feel about being part of the European Union? Especially to the beautiful people in Italia. Good to see all of you, Italy. Or in Greece, the Greek city-states. Don't act like purists, though. What's wrong with you? But no, seriously, to our beautiful European audience, how do you feel? We want to hear from everyone from Hispania, Gaul, Germania, and Britannia. Type in the comment section below.
One of the most insightful perspectives I ever got on what the European Union may be is from a conversation I had with a viewer from China in my Discord server. He told me that from his perspective of interpreting history as a Chinese national, the worst thing that ever happened to Europe was the collapse of the Roman Empire. He draws
Brilliant analysis for that. Yeah! Yes! Worst thing that ever happened? fall of Rome. I'm looking at you, Germania. Eyes directly on you. And also what happened to Constantinople, but we're not talking about that right now, okay? I just my heart can only take so much, but a brilliant analysis from somebody from China. Brilliant job. Brilliant. That should be a quote. Worst thing that ever happened to Europe was the fall of the Roman Empire. Rewind that again.
The worst thing that ever happened to Europe was the collapse of the Roman Empire. As a Chinese national, the worst thing that ever happened to Europe was the collapse of the Roman Empire. As a Chinese national, the worst thing that ever happened to Europe was the collapse of the Roman Empire. As a Chinese national, the worst thing that ever happened to Europe was the collapse of the Roman Empire.
I think this is my favorite video of this year.
He draws parallels between the history of Rome and the histories of the Qin and Han dynasties. Both set out on the task of unifying their regions.
Beautiful.
And binding a patchwork of cultures together under a civilization state. But
Yes!
whereas the Qin and Han succeeded in creating the foundations of a Chinese civilization,
With the help of the Mongols, because Genghis Khan kind of helped out too. And him and his fantastic friends.
state, the Romans failed.
I didn't like looking at that.
Centuries to come, different Europeans would desperately try to revive the project of the European civilization state, to create a middle kingdom of Europe of sorts, but all of them failed.
Right.
Instead, Europe became a
How dare they stand where he once stood?
place of deep divisions which undermined the creation of a unified European civilizational polity, and in its stead created nations. They expanded outside of Europe by imperialism in attempts to collect the resources needed to unite Europe. By mistake, created American civilization and exported their systems of
Woo! USA! Chip, chip, cheerio to our friends in Great Britain. We love you.
ethnic and religious political divisions to places like Africa and Asia. This European imperialism ultimately failed, and the European Union, from his perspective, is the latest attempt to finalize and create a post-imperial unified European civilizational state. He explained that to him and to many of his Chinese compatriots, the European Union is viewed favorably. For if it would come to be as a civilizational polity that unifies Europe, they believe that its emphasis on social democracy and regulated markets over the ruthless capitalism of the United States will lead to a split between the two and thereby further the creation of a multipolar world. Now, I do not agree with our Chinese viewer.
Okay. Hey. He was right about the one thing, though. The worst thing that happened in Europe was the fall of the Roman Empire.
Particular, his concept of civilization and his geopolitical biases are also very clear. But nonetheless, I find it very interesting and worth presenting. It certainly is an interesting perspective on how European imperialism came to be, but it also gives a twist on a popular way of interpreting history. In essence, our Chinese friend is saying, actually, you Europeans are the backward ones. We Chinese resolved the question of establishing a common...
Hey, just be sure to remind, hey, shout out to our beautiful fans in China. I don't think do we have viewers in China? Maybe not. But if we do, hey, just hey. Not putting salt in the wound, but just remember, Genghis Khan and his fantastic friends walked around the Great Wall. Shout out to Genghis Khan and his fantastic friends.
Civilizational polity over 3,000 years ago, while you failed. You instead adopted the nation, and the nation is a political regression that is inferior to the civilizational polity. But you Europeans are gradually on the road to accomplishing what we Chinese accomplished 3,000 years before you, and we welcome your progress.
I, for one, welcome our new alien overlords. We welcome you for finally putting 2 and 2 together.
Now, I disagree with this narrative, but there is one thing in particular regarding European political development on which our Chinese friend is, in my opinion, correct. The European Union is a post-imperial political project. A project that not only strives to overcome conflict among nation-states, but a project that seeks to build an alternative to imperialism. Overcoming conflict between nation-states is one of the main stated goals of the European political project. The common fiction that many Europeans tell themselves to be the foundation of the European Union is
that the first time Germania was being a jerk? Never forget the tragedy at the Teutoburg Force. All what Quintius Varus was trying to do was, just ask, hey, what happened to our tax guys? That's it. But no. Arminius. It's all right. I'm not mad. I'm just furious. Curses upon Germania.
Is the myth of the state that learned from history. That Europeans, after decades of bloodshed and violence,
That'll be the last time.
decided to learn from history, determined that to avoid conflict, Europeans needed to learn to share among themselves, and therefore created a unique system of international cooperation. Far-right critics of the European Union often invoke an opposing political fiction, the golden era of nationalism from the 1920s to 1930s, that the collapse of European empires during the First World War led to the almost natural development into smaller nation-states based on nationality defined through language or ethnicity, who supposedly existed in peace. Now, besides the fact that anyone who praises the politics of 1930s Europe is always kinda suspicious anyway, this idea is also general.
There's just something not cash money about that time era, I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something just not, what? If I had shades on, that's not cash money.
Untrue. The interwar period was not an era of peace. In fact, this era contains the most wars fought in Europe during the 20th century. The Soviet invasion of Georgia, the Soviet invasion of Armenia, the Soviet invasion of Azerbaijan, the Soviet invasion of Ukraine, the first Soviet invasion of Poland, the first Soviet invasion of Finland, the first Soviet invasion of Estonia, the first Soviet invasion of Lithuania, and the first Soviet invasion of Latvia.
Hey, Jesus Christ. Ever hear of pulling out? You're going in deep. It's a lot of baby mamas.
What these wars, almost all involving the Soviet Union, show us is that the death of Central European and Eastern European traditional empires almost instantly resulted in the re-emergence of new European empires to take their place. Especially the early 1920s saw an extremely aggressive new Soviet empire attempting to conquer and subjugate much of Eastern Europe. Now, to be fair, right-wing historians acknowledge this, and they describe communism as an attempt at eradication of the nation-state by a new form of imperialism. However, here is something that far-right historians often tend to ignore. The Polish-Ukrainian War, the Georgian-Armenian War, the Georgian-Turkish War, the Armenian-Azerbaijani War, the Greek-Turkish War, the Polish-Lithuanian War, the Hungarian-Romanian War, the Hungarian-Czechoslovak War, the Greek-Bulgarian War, and the Czechoslovak-Polish War. The interwar
everybody's just fighting everybody. What the everyone chill.
period saw almost all new nation-states born from the First World War engage in border disputes and expansionist squabbles over who owned what. Often these squabbles were not even about ethnic or lingual groups who lived on disputed lands, but over resources. The Czechoslovak-Polish War was, for example, fought over a region of Silesia that was majority Czech and German, but which the Poles wanted because of its enormous coal deposits. The reason for all of these conflicts is that the idea of a self-limiting nation-state did not exist at that time. Nationalism, as created in the 1800s right up to the 1920s, was a political force that in fact actively tried to build spheres of influence over peoples outside of one's respective nationality. Many European nationalist movements in fact built upon an idea of their own cultural or ethnic superiority and saw it as part of their nation-creating mission to domineer over others on that basis. The self-limiting nationalism that argues for a nation-state that deliberately shuns spheres of influence over others is not even a Western European political innovation, but a Turkish one. Atatürk was the first political thinker to formulate that idea in the late 1920s.
Hey, our good friend Ataturk. Good to see you again, buddy.
It is one of the founding pillars of Kemalism and the reason why Kemalists advocate for Turkish isolationism. In many ways, our modern understanding of nationalism was invented by the Turks. The collapse of European empires is similar to the collapse of Yugoslavia, resulting in the emergence of fresh states who instantly engaged in petty squabbles over who owned what and who was what. The way Serb nationalists formulated political fictions that declared Montenegrins as an inherent cultural part bound to Serbia in many ways reminds me of how the Czechs created a fiction of the Slovaks as an inherently bound part of Czechia. There was no golden age of European nation-states and nationalism, as many right-wing critics of the European Union claim. The era of European nation-states were 2 decades of war and instability, and it is this squabbling and conflict between states that is the mission of the European Union to overcome. Many non-Europeans often overlook this aspect and purpose of the European Union and of modern European politics: reconciliation. In 1984, the French president François Mitterrand and the German Chancellor Helmut Kohl met at Verdun, the site of the most vicious fighting of the First World War. They stood at the coffin of an unknown soldier who was draped in the flag of both nations, held hands, and attended over a ceremony of remembrance together. Rituals like these are a core component of the success of the European project and have to be maintained for that project to continue and succeed. We tend to overlook the importance of ritual in politics, but rituals, no matter how much they may or may not be formalized, lie at the center of all political engagement. And the rituals of reconciliation are an important pillar of what the European Union is built upon. It is a promise that enables economic cooperation.
See, the thing is, when you say never again, never say never. And unfortunately, humanity, we are world heavyweight champions of just screwing things up. But seriously, though, to our European friends in Gaul, Hispania, Germania, in Italia and Britannia, give us your thoughts, and all over Europe. Give us your thoughts. How do you feel about the European Union? Let's all be nice. I know I'm asking the internet to be nice, but let's be nice and have a civil conversation. Give us your thoughts. Let's respect each other's points of view and perspectives. So we actually follow through with what the video is, and that's reconciliation, perspectives and points of view. And there we go.
In the first place. Some non-Europeans often dismiss it as little more than an expression of a supposedly masochistic German guilt. But these state rituals, in fact, should not be labeled as such. They are essential to creating a political understanding of preserving a common peace, and they are not only conducted by Germany. When the Soviet occupation of Eastern Europe ended, all the newly liberated countries engaged in foreign policies of reconciliation and peace to overcome any and all enmities that may still remain from the interwar period. Bulgaria and Greece also underwent this process of reconciliation during the 1920s, so did Italy and Greece before. But this process has also on occasion failed, most prominently between Hungary and many of its neighbors. The Orban government, through its constant denial of the sovereign integrity of its neighbors, is a factor that continuously undermines and challenges the core foundation of reconciliation in European politics. A process of reconciliation and friendship between Greece and Turkey was successful throughout the 2000s, but then unfortunately collapsed during the 2010s.
I'm willing to bet somebody had to play the song Istanbul, not Constantinople. That would get anybody angry. So somebody that's my excuse about why maybe they had a falling out. Watch, there's actually a far more complicated and reasonable reason why, or much more intricate reason why there was a fallout. But I'm in my head canon, the conversation of Constantinople was brought up. It had to have been brought up. Somebody had to say Constantinople. So it was like, actually, it's Istanbul, to which they correctly said, the real name is Constantinople. Okay, I don't want to get in trouble.
But by far the biggest failure in European reconciliation was with Russia. 2 consecutive German governments invested in an energy policy that they believed would result in an economic codependence that would guarantee peace. And while there was hope in the early 2010s of a reconciliation between Russia and Poland, Russia eventually destroyed any hopes of reconciliation with Europe. So to summarize, one of the foundations of modern Europe as a political entity is not the destruction of individual nation-states, but the facilitation of peace through reconciliation. And importantly, as Russian gas shows us, reconciliation must come before economic cooperation. And to ensure cooperation can continue, this process of reconciliation, as well as the rituals of reconciliation, must be continued. Those who disrupt this process should be sanctioned for doing so. And if the European Union is to expand, it it must export this process as a requirement to those who wish to apply. Another aspect of understanding the European Union
Please, don't show me the follow from. I only could take so much.
in its political context of development is to create a political system of organization that can persevere in a post-imperial age. And this is where I agree but also disagree with our Chinese friend. There's a political thinker from before the European Union whose ideas in many ways predate the European Union, but can also in some ways be found within the aspects of the European Union, be it intentional or not. Józef Piłsudski, the leader of the First Polish Republic. The political mission of his state was a political idea that is largely forgotten today, called Prometheanism. Piłsudski and other Polish
Prometheus, the greatest of the Titans.
intellectuals of the Polish independence movement believed that imperialism was a form of political organization that was doomed to fail, and that they lived during the era of its demise. Poland was one of the first nations to attain independence from the death of imperialism, and it was therefore Poland's national duty to not build a new Polish empire, but to hasten the process of killing imperialism in its entirety. And Poland's principal target of this ought to be the destruction of Russian imperialism by supporting any and all independence movements within its borders, because Russian imperialism was the primary threat to Polish statehood. Piłsudski also correctly asserted that the Soviet Union was not a new means of political organization, but just a rebranded Russian imperialism. As part of Prometheanism, Poland ought to help create a geopolitical sphere called the intermarium, a federation of all states in a triangle between the Baltic, Black and Adriatic seas, as a common economic and military alliance against the aggressive imperial ambitions of Russia, Germany and Italy. Now, none of this ever came to be. If it had, it would have probably prevented the Second World War. Poland itself ended up bickering with many of its neighbors throughout the European nation-state bickerings of the 1920s and 1930s. But the historical realities aside, there is a core truth to what Piłsudski believed, and an important truth as well. The key to overcoming and resisting imperialism is for nation-states, who would usually fall victim to imperialism, to cooperate together. Piłsudski's ghost can very much be seen in the policies of the former Soviet bloc in Europe. Cooperation to withstand outside aggression. And this in some sense is one of the key promises of the modern European project. Reconciliation does not only offer the prospect of economic cooperation, but comes with the promise of protection from empire, to create a political structure that can overcome empire. Curiously enough though, almost all the founding countries of the European Union were not nation-states, but European empires. They either still had overseas empires or were recent European empires. Britain was also an empire when it joined. It is important to acknowledge and admit the fact that the European Union was created by dying and dead empires, who sought out a means of existence after empire. This also helps us understand modern political myths and misconceptions. A large part of the Brexit campaign, for example, was driven on the promise of returning to an imagined great past when Britain was...
You know, yeah, how is that going, by the way? I mean, wasn't there supposed to be some complications earlier on?
Just a nation-state. This is a lie. Britain never existed as a nation-state before the European Union. It only existed as an empire. When Britain joined the common market, it was still an overseas empire that could hitch onto its foreign properties to stay afloat and dictate policies to others. Britain joined so it could take part...
Hey lads, had a little bit too much at the pub.
...in cooperation with Europeans to stay afloat as its empire died. Britain, as a sole nation-state without an empire, only exists since 2016 after Brexit, and the British, through that decision, are now forced the hard way to confront the fact that they are no longer an empire and no longer in a position to dictate policy to anyone.
Whoa, wait, is that Australia? Yeah, that is Australia right behind them. Oh. Dang. There's USA right there. There's India. There's China. But I think that's all. Yeah, that has to be. Yeah, that's Australia because Australia has the white stars and New Zealand has the red stars. See, I could read flags.
one. In many ways, the European project came to similar conclusions as Pilsudski and the Prometheans had in the 1920s. The foundations of a post-imperial political order must be cooperation of nation-states and the abandoning of imperial ambitions. This harbors potential conflict in Europe's future. France is Europe's last empire. And one thing our Chinese viewer is correct about is that European empires used resources from colonies to gain advantages in the power struggles of Europe. France also uses its overseas spheres of influence, in particular in Africa, to gain advantages in Europe today and thereby cause resentments and hinder European integration. An example, France is proud of its energy independence through nuclear power. Half of the French nuclear fuel comes from Canada, but the rest comes from mines in its African sphere of influence. If it loses its African sphere of influence, it will either have to purchase more expensive nuclear fuel from Canada, Australia, or the United States, or turn to a European solution of cooperation. Ukraine has the largest uranium deposits in Europe. To get cheap Ukrainian uranium, France would have to stop blocking
Hold on, wait. To get cheap uranium from Ukrainian uranium. Ukrainian uranium. Kind of rhymes there. Hold on.
deposits in Europe. To get cheap Ukrainian uranium, Ukraine has the largest uranium deposits in Europe. To get cheap Ukrainian uranium, France would have to stop blocking Ukrainian European Union membership. But through this compromise, it would have to allow Ukraine to sell its cheap agricultural produce to compete with French agricultural produce. As you can see, the fact that France still clings on to remnants of its empire comes as a detriment to a further European integration, because it means that France can avoid compromises that it else would have to make. And that is the core sacrifice that every participant in the European project makes. Everyone always has to compromise. Everyone has to make some sacrifices in order to benefit together with all in common. France keeping its empire gives it an unjust advantage in the process, and many European countries are increasingly unhappy with this. To maintain cooperation with Europe, France will have to probably let go of its influence in Africa in the near future. And here is where I disagree with our Chinese friend. I do not see the European political project as just another empire, or the attempted creation of a European civilizational polity as a player in a multipolar world. I believe its model of national cooperation is a framework that in the long term can undermine the entire concept of polarity and create a post-imperial world. And for that to succeed, the concept must also be promoted abroad. This is something often pointed out by Portuguese politicians who argue that Europe should seek deeper ties, cooperation and trade with the Mercosur, African Union and ASEAN rather than with the United States. That Europe should promote national cooperation through the Mercosur, African Union and ASEAN as an alternative to being in an American sphere of influence or a Chinese sphere of influence. In summary, that cooperation between nation states as a political development can function as a mechanism to overcome imperialism and create the post-imperial world. Thank you again to Enlisted for sponsoring this video. Remember to get your free bonus right now with the link in the description. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so through Patreon, PayPal or Ko-fi. Links are in the description. If you would like to discuss this video with other subscribers or with me, you can do so by joining our Discord.
Very interesting. So, all right, there's a couple of things to unpack here. First of all, obviously there's the idea of cooperation and nation states and nations working together for a better future is something I think we all can subscribe to. But yet, the key word is compromise. Compromise is the key word, and in order to do that, people have to. Oh boy, had something, then I screwed it up. You know, you have to work together. You have to, really try and build something. And look, I do wish everyone all the best, especially what they're trying to do there with the European Union. But everything has its flaws, and so, as an outsider, living in the good old U.S. of A., it's abundantly clear to me that. I'm not too familiar about what it's like to live under the European Union, or either that have my said country to be part of a union of that magnitude. So, to our European audience, I look to you, those in Spain, France, Germany, Britain, Italy, Greece, all over Europe. all over the great continental landmass of Europe. Give us your thoughts. We would like to hear from you. Is it good, bad? How is it like? What is it like overall? And especially those in Britain. How do you feel about, of course, with the aftermath of Brexit? How's that all turning out? I think it's very good that we hear at least feedback from the people who live in the European Union. So let's try and be nice, even though it's probably not going to happen because it's the internet. But let's respect each other's decisions and our comments, and how we share each other's perspectives. So it's the right thing to do. So let's all be nice. Let's all be friendly. Let's all listen to each other, hear each other out, and there you go. But all in all, I really like this video from Kraut, and my only criticism of this video so far is just one thing and one thing alone. Hit the refresh page. Are we ever going to get the sequel to Democracy, Imperial Japan, The Fall of Democracy? That was 5 years ago. It would ever be so nice to get the sequel to that one. I hope we do someday. Hopefully in the future. Until then, take good care of yourselves and each other. Please, everyone, support the original content creator. It's the right thing to do. It's the one thing to do. And looking forward to hearing from our European audience. Or even if you were an American, hey, let's go ahead and add in America and Canada and everywhere else. If you live in the USA or any other part of the world and you had a chance to live in Europe, what are your thoughts of the European Union? Let's bring everyone in. Let's do cooperation. Let's bring in everybody. I just sure hope the comment section doesn't turn into a nightmare. Please, everybody, be nice. Is that a bridge too far? Yes, it is.